Sometimes in animation, there is no love for it. It's just a means to produce a product. For me, though, animation is more than just a story, it's also an art form. Since I was little, it's always been the shows and films that were able to combine both that I was drawn to the most. The ones with the beautifully designed characters and the creative and imaginative worlds in which those characters lived. The Simpsons. It's the opposite of what I've just said. Although it's classic popular animation, the animation is simple and it's quick. It's only there for getting the gags and jokes out. At the end of the day, it's viewings and ratings that matter the most. Which is why I want you to meet Hayao Miyazaki. Born January 5th, 1941, Tokyo, and here he is with one of his 30 cigarettes a day, rather healthy. He was brought up during World War II, so therefore war has featured rather negatively in all of his films. Other themes to his films include strong female characters, spirituality and environmentalism. And there's no clear good or bad between the characters. All characters have a chance to sort of change themselves. Flight is also one of the many recurring themes in his films. This was because that when he was young, his father worked on planes such as this, the A6M0 fighter, which also features in his last film, rather negatively. Though flight is not something that is essential in his films. You could cut out the amount of time there are flying sequences in the films and it would still be a good film. That's not the point. The point is that flying for Miyazaki is a sense of freedom, and it's his artistic choice to include something like that in his films. Sort of to be confronted by something that has no other purpose other than to be looked at is something that Miyazaki still finds essential and valuable. So flight can go from a range of different things into his films, from planes to magical aircrafts and even flying rabbits. Meet Totoro. This is one of Miyazaki's many characters. If you don't know Totoro, then I'm positive you do. Here he is in Toy Story 3, having a great time with Woody and the gang. They're having a lot of fun. And it's Pixar paying homage to a master animator. Speaking of masters, haha. Miyazaki and his studio that he co-founded, Studio Ghibli, has a lot in common with Renaissance master art studios. Young apprentices would come into the studio of an artist and work his way up. So they'd start off by mixing paint, and then they'd move on to maybe paint a bit of the sky or the background, and then going on to paint bits of the body or whatever if they got good enough. Giovanni Bellini is one such master painter. Everything in his studio is his vision, and all the young apprentices were watched by him. And as a master, he also has high standards. Like Miyazaki, they are both the head of their studio, and everything fits to their vision. So, for example, where a young apprentice might mix paints for this painting, Madonna with Child, young animators in Miyazaki's studio would maybe mix the watercolors, or where a young apprentice might paint something in the background, a young animator might animate a cloud. It brings me on to the story of where Miyazaki took on 10 apprentices in his studio, and he got them to sit the test, and he sat everyone down the next again day after looking at the test, and he went, yeah, sorry, it was good, but it wasn't good enough, you all failed. So this goes to show that Miyazaki doesn't compromise for the high standards that his films have. I could go on forever and talk about every Miyazaki film, but I can't because some of you want to get home tonight. But I've settled on Spirited Away because for me it combines story and art the best, and it's also one of the most successful, winning an Oscar in 2003 for Best Animated Feature. So let's meet the characters. In the pink we have Chihiro. She's the young 10-year-old who gets caught up in the spirit world and where she makes friends with the river spirit Haku here on the right. As with all Studio Ghibli films, there is an organic process which is unlike some Western industries, where planning is strict and kept to order, not to waste time and money. In Miyazaki's films, they allow themselves to plan and animate at the same time. So one day they could do this, and they could drop it the next again day. So not only does Miyazaki script and direct the films, but he also storyboards himself. After storyboarding, we have something like this. It's called a layout, and that's basically to find your camera angle and sort of to show your lighting. After this, each frame is drawn individually by hand, then burnt onto carbon paper, so then it can be put onto a clear plastic cell, which is get ready to be painted with watercolor. After these stages are sort of completed, we move on to doing the backgrounds separately, and this literally means there are little mini paintings in the animation. Once these stages are done, it's combined with the corresponding cell and shot with its background. Even going back to the layout of the bathhouse from Spirited Away, they alone are little works of art, and they could easily stand out in any gallery, and because they're so beautifully done and they have the same care and attention to them as a piece of fine art. The storyboard of the layout of the bathhouse reminds me of Kate Downey's drawing of the fourth rail bridge. And as you can see, that these pre-production drawings have all the quality and power to be able to stand up against a piece of fine art. As with all great art, though, mood plays an important part, and Miyazaki realizes this as an artist, and he captured this in his animation. Chihiro is based off a real 10-year-old little girl, so I'm going to show you a bit of the animation from the film, and I want you to pay particular attention to every little detail in the faces that he creates here. So from the pout at the beginning to the sort of stubborn shouting back, and then where the wind startles her, her whole expression changes, and the attention to detail where her eyebrows are sort of lifting up. And also where the wind, there's so much detail and attention to where the wind is. You can see how it almost pulls her body along, and it's pulling at her collar, and it's coming right up in around her t-shirt, and you can see it. And then also where the hair is sort of, blowing in every sort of direction and sort of carrying her. And then even where her hands come up almost defensively to sort of clasp herself in sort of like a defensive mode. All these little things is what makes Miyazaki's animations a higher standard than compared to most. I'm going to show you another bit, and it's this bit here. More simple compared to the last one, but it's basically Haku walking through the garden. But you can see the rich and dense colours in the background that sort of create a very vivid and lifelike appearance to the garden, with the petals even being painted in different colours. And even the small attention to Haku's shadow as he walks along the flowers, you can sort of see that. And although the animation is more simple, notice the sort of the slight wave bouncing in his hair that creates a sort of very calm movement. It's almost hypnotic to look at, with the very dense and rich background combined with the sort of very calm movements that Haku creates. It's a bit different from what you've just seen. It's very blunt and it's very crude. There's more block shapes and block colouring being used, and there's quicker. And I'm not saying that it's not art, because animation is art, but although it's funny, I'm not saying it's a form of fine art, like Miyazaki's work. What's great about Miyazaki is that his art is finding his way into mainstream cartoons. For instance, we have Michael Dante, DiMartino, and Brian Konietzko. They created shows such as Avatar: The Last Airbender, in which this show also deals greatly with lots of detail, and also the creators of the show have said that Spirited Away is one of the greatest influences that they've had from Miyazaki, with actual animation sequences with dragons being directly taken from Miyazaki's work and used in Avatar, which was a great help to them because dragons aren't real, so it's helped a lot. Also, another show is French animation Oban Star Racers, where it benefited from the imaginative backgrounds, which clearly parallel in Spirited Away. Both of these shows include attention to detail and the freedom of ideas, where it's okay for the characters to get, a bit weird and loose and, creative. If you thought it was just small-time shows that took inspiration, then think again. John Lasseter, creative chief director of Walt Disney and Pixar, has said that he's a great inspiration. He says that whenever the artists are getting a bit low, he says, I put a Miyazaki film on the projector, and he says every one of them will come out being like, yeah, I can animate. He's almost like a savior in Pixar. So Miyazaki sets a standard for others to try and push themselves to. Not only was Miyazaki an inspiration, but he was also inspired by great art. So Kiki's Delivery Service with one of Van Gogh's paintings, and we have Ponyo with Hokusai, and even Spirited Away with Monet's Water Lilies. And it shows that Miyazaki is carrying on the line of artistic integrity. I hope that by the end of this talk I've convinced you that not all animation is the same, that there are people out there who are creating beautiful masterpieces. With Miyazaki retiring this year with his final film, The Wind Rises, it's left the animation world with a question: who's going to carry his legacy on? His sons? Probably not. The young animators, if they ever get good enough to pass that test. And me, well, I'm applying to study animation, so I'd like to think that in a few years I could give it my best shot. Thanks.
Okay, so Jodie and the master animator. I liked the discussion between is it fine art, is it cartoons, is it drawing? Let me tell you why. I thought that was, for me, that was the kind of essence of it. I thought I think your description of the technicality for me, was really important. I think the assumption that I know how these are made and I know that all of you guys don't was really good. Because I think that, for me, really, the images of how these blooming things are made really illustrated the point you were trying to say to us. I thought the images that you chose were really good as well, because I'm sure there's an awful lot of images you could have. And I think the little animation and how you went into such great detail of telling us where to look and how to look was really was successful as well.